When I was 21, I started a relationship with a man who was both my professional mentor and my healthcare practitioner. It turns out he was also a very prolific sexual predator who had entered the healing profession so that he would have a supply of young, trusting prey. And it was later that I learned how I and so many of his other young clients and students had indeed fallen prey to his sexual abuse and his financial cons. So this was a very painful experience in my life, but I actually look back on it with gratitude because I learned one of the most important lessons of my life, which is I learned the predator's playbook. It is the playbook of manipulation that is used both by individual abusers, but also on a societal and global level. And because I learned to see this, to see what manipulation looks like and how it takes place. When the COVID mandates rolled out, I was able to see pretty immediately that these were very dangerous anti-health measures that would lead to tyranny and the removal of our freedoms. I want to share 3 ways that an abusive relationship helped me see the truth about COVID mandates. First, I learned that coercion is more powerful than physical force. My abuser didn't lock me up in my house, but he effectively isolated me from my family, my friends, my peer group, all the same. He convinced and manipulated me to pull away from my friends and my family and not see any other therapists or professional experts. He pulled me away from anyone who would help me recognize that I was in a very dangerous situation. In a similar way, he didn't forcibly rape me when I first started seeing him as a client. If he had, I probably would have fought back and recognized what was happening. But what he did with me and so many of his other clients, he groomed us through inappropriate touch while we were in his practice. And so we didn't fight back immediately. We didn't even recognize this as sexual abuse from the get-go. Now, this is why coercion is more powerful than physical force. Because when you have physical force, the victim recognizes that they are being forced against their will, and they will often fight back. And even if they can't fight back, they recognize something is wrong here. I'm not doing what I want to do. They recognize somebody is the enemy. Now, when it comes to coercion, you can actually change not only the victim's behavior, but also their thoughts and their personality. So with effective coercion, the victim happily complies with their self-destruction or with their abuse because they see the manipulator as their friend or somebody who has their best interest at heart. So if, for example, American police had immediately locked Americans up in their homes during early lockdowns, Americans probably would have recognized they were being isolated against their free will and their constitutional rights, and they might have fought back immediately instead of complying. If what we're seeing in Shanghai now with the forcible lockdowns had happened immediately in America, we might have recognized the truth of the situation. Similarly, if doctors had taken to the streets and forcibly injected citizens with this experimental gene therapy drug, we might have fought back. We might have recognized it as medical genocide. But because it was done through expertly crafted propaganda, and because we saw those people who were sharing the propaganda as people who had our best interest at heart, people who already had authority and credibility in our eyes, we complied. Second, telling someone you're being selfish is a very effective control technique. So in this relationship, my abuser told me that I was selfish if I wanted to spend time with my friends or tell the truth about what was happening in my life to my family, or if I wanted to see a therapist or another professional expert. And he did this because, like I mentioned, if I had been honest or spent time with any of these people, they would have helped me recognize the dangerous situation I was in and how I was losing my true self and my freedoms in my life. This line was effective in having me change my behavior because I didn't want to be seen as a mean person. I was, a compassionate, kind person, and I wanted to be nice. So I didn't question the underlying intentions or facts in the situation. Now in 2020, it was so eerie and like Twilight Zone strange to have the US government telling me the same line that my abuser had previously told me, which was, you're being selfish if you don't comply with my requests and how I want you to live your life, right? So we heard this line, you're being selfish if you don't get the experimental gene therapy shot, or you're being selfish if you don't close down your business and your livelihood to support the community. Now, people had this knee-jerk response of complying without questioning, without even thinking. And I understand this because I was there once before in my life. It is a very effective control tactic to say to somebody, you're being selfish, because we have this knee-jerk response of, oh, I'm a nice person. I want to be nice. I want to be kind. I want to take care of others. And we don't take the time to think. Now, the key here that helped me see through this rhetoric was one day it clicked for me when my abuser was telling me this, you're being selfish. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, what if he's the selfish one? And I had such a light bulb moment. And so what I encourage people to do is when any person or power structure, any marketing force in your life is telling you you're being selfish unless you behave a certain way, turn that around and imagine it as they're being selfish. How could that be true? How could it be true that Pfizer is actually being selfish for requiring you to get certain pharmaceuticals in your body that they financially benefit from, for example? Number 3, I learned that to manipulate someone, you have to make them avoid certain experts. So when the propaganda happened for the pandemic, we were told through the government and through big tech, which was, of course, funded by the pharmaceutical interests, to not consult with certain experts, right? So we were told, well, you need to trust the science and listen to the doctors and the health experts, but not that science, not those doctors, not Dr. Mercola, of course, with his peer-reviewed literature, and not the frontline doctors who have all that clinical hands-on experience. No, don't listen to those doctors. They're the bad ones. They're sharing misinformation. So this happened in so many different ways. And like I have mentioned, this paralleled my experience where I was told by my abuser, you must not consult, for example, with a therapist or with any other healthcare provider, because he knew if I saw other experts, they would help me recognize the dangerous situation I was in. They would help me put 2 and 2 together. Now, another interesting parallel is that because this man was also my healthcare provider, he was giving me certain supplements and nutrition recommendations. I believed he was the expert on my body and had my best interest at heart, so I didn't question the protocols he gave me. What I realized was he was actually slowly poisoning and weakening me on purpose. This was really a dark and dire thing to realize. But again, this is happening on a global level. The population is being intentionally poisoned and weakened by those who wish to control the population. And then on top of that, people are being told, but you can't consult with the experts who would actually help you realize that you are being poisoned and weakened on purpose. So for some closing thoughts, I was in that abusive relationship for 3 years because I trusted my abuser more than I trusted myself. I believed him when he said he was the expert and that he had my best interest at heart, instead of listening to my own heart. In the case of the COVID mandates, Americans and people around the globe sacrificed their freedoms and their constitutional rights because they blindly trusted the experts instead of digging deeper into the intentions, the agenda, the corporate interest, the financial bias, the political influence, and the real science at play. And so if the government decides again to roll out these mandates, which in fact they will, because that's how an abuser works. If their technique worked the first time, they will try it again, and they will try it harder, and they will try to push the victim farther the next time. So I should say, when the government attempts these illegal and unconstitutional mandates again, do not comply, and remember that you alone are the expert on your health and your body. And please remember that your freedom is never selfish.